Hello, good evening, and very good evening. I hope you guys doing great, like always. Today's topic is very famous, actually, and a lot of has been talked, discussed. People shared their theories and ideas, and the topic is the full frame camera is better for low light. I'm not talking about depth of field, shallow depth of field. No. I'm just strictly and specifically talking about this concept that people think that if you want a good low light performance, go for full frame. That's the topic for today. And I'm going to talk with facts and with theoretical, deep technical things and all that. And I want to be, as trying to explain this phenomena in a layman language as possible so everybody can understand. Not everybody is technical. So, this concept that full frame is better for low light, well, that's totally wrong. Totally wrong. And I'm going to explain you how. Any camera performance is based on three parts. Three parts. I'm not talking about lenses, I'm not talking about full frame, crop frame. I'm just specifically talking about the full frame is better for low light. Just this one line. And I'm going to explain you that line. Whoever said that is wrong. It used to be right 5 years ago and before, but not anymore. And I'm going to explain you how it's not valid anymore. Any camera performance is based on three factors. Three. Number one, type of the sensor, like conventional sensor or BSI sensor. Number two, the size of the pixel, and I'm going to explain you how. Number three is SNR firmware, which is the camera software inside the camera processor. So we are going to discuss all these 3 points one by one. Okay. Let's start with number 1 point, which I said the type of the sensor. If it's a conventional sensor or BSI sensor, well, it's very easy to explain. Like if you have different pixels on the top of the sensor, so if there's 1 pixel, 2 pixel, 3 pixel, 4 pixel, so usually what happens was the wiring, the physical electronic wiring of the pixel was used to be on top of the pixels of those photodiodes, what we technically call them photodiodes, which captures the light. Once you press the shutter release, the light enters from the lens, hit on the sensor. So what happens is there is a whole range of micro lens array sitting on top of the pixels. So if this is a pixel, so there is a very micro lens on top of the pixel, on top of it, whose job is to funnel the light inside the pixel, so pixel can record the amount of light. Okay, so micro lens array design itself is a very physical thing, but I'm not going to talk about it in much more details. I'm just specifically going to keep the conversation about the pixel. So pixel is just a physical photodiode whose job is to capture light and produce electronic signal which go directly to the analog to digital converter, and that's it. By the way, we are using DSLR or mirrorless cameras and they are all digital, right? These are all digital. But surprisingly, not many people, and I'm pretty much sure 99.99% people doesn't, all the photographers doesn't know that the digital sensor, the sensor inside every digital camera is analog. Yep, it's analog because it captures the light and give the output in a form of electronic signal, which is electronic voltage, which is physical. That's analog signal, which going out from the photodiode, which is further then transferred or converted into digital format, which is 10101100, whatever. So all the digital sensor inside any digital camera is analog. Okay, that's first thing. So what happened with the conventional sensor, which is pixel, the wiring was on top of the pixel, so there is not enough gap left because there is too much wiring on the pixel, so there is not much enough gap left or the window left, so the light falls on it and goes inside the photodiode, which captures the light and then produce electronic signal according to the quantity of light it captures. So it's just like they're very narrow window on top of the photodiode. Now PSI sensor, what PSI sensor did, because the conventional sensor they don't have enough opening on the top of the pixel. So what PSI sensor did, they took off all the electronic wiring from the top of the pixel, because this is the pixel electronic wiring on top of it. They took out the electronic wiring and put beneath the pixel, so they have much broader window on top of the each pixel, so they can capture more light. All right, that's the whole idea. So they took out the electronic wiring from the top and put beneath of each pixel. So all the electronics, it's not now on the top of the pixel, it's beneath the pixel. So pixel is now fully open to capture all the light. But the question is how much light it's going to capture. Well, roughly speaking, one third or two third of the stop of light, it usually get better. I'm testing right now, since last couple of days, Z5 and Z62 from Nikon. Z5 contains the conventional sensor where the wiring of the pixel is on top of the pixel, and Z62 is a PSI sensor, which where the wiring is beneath the pixel. And in the same circumstances, and both are 24 megapixel. Both are 24 megapixel. Z5 24 megapixel conventional sensor, Z62 24 megapixel PSI sensor. Both are 24 megapixel and both are full frame. But Z62 performs better. And I found that if I was shooting at fixed aperture and fixed shutter speed on both cameras, and I put the ISO on auto, the auto ISO value on the Z62 was less and compared to Z5. Z5 was shooting at 2200 ISO, so Z6 was shooting at 2000 ISO. So 2200 ISO and 2000 ISO. It means that the amount of light which Z62 was getting was much more. That's why its ISO was low, because both the aperture and shutter speed was the same and both are exposed to the same light. So that's how I found an evidence, and I'll make a separate video about it. I'll show you guys later. So yeah, BSI sensor have their own advantage for low light. It means that you are getting around 1 by third, 1 upon 3 to 2 upon 3 kind of a more light in compared to. So yeah, that's it. 0.3 to 0.7, technically speaking, 0.3 to 0.7 EV more light on the BSI sensor in compared to conventional sensor. So that's one point. Number 2 point is that the size of the pixel. And I said this thing a lot of time in my previous videos that the lower the megapixel, the bigger the pixel size, it means that it's better for low light. The higher the megapixel, it means that the smaller the pixel size, it means worse or bad for low light. Now, you have two full frame cameras, and I'm going to quote from the famous brand which you guys love, Sony. Alright, Sony makes two full frame cameras, A7S3, which is 12 megapixel, and then the next is A7R4, which is 61 megapixel. So 12 megapixel, 61 megapixel, both are full frame. But why the low light performance of Sony A7S3 is better than Sony A7R4, which is 61 megapixel? Why? The answer is very simple. Is because the size of the A7R3 pixels is much bigger, which is 8.4 micron meter. So the Sony A7S III 12 megapixel is pixel size is 8.4 micron meter, and Sony A7R4 61 megapixel, it has small pixel size, 61 megapixel, so its pixel has 3.7 something, 3.79 micron meter. So 8.4, 3.9. So it means that the size of the pixel is Sony A7S III has huge, more than double. So it means that it can capture more light in at the same shutter speed. If Sony A7S III and Sony A7R4 both exposed to the same light, those you are getting more light on Sony A7S III because of the bigger pixel size. So, but at the same time, Sony A7R4, which is also a full frame camera, but it's 61 megapixel, which in terms of crop sensor is 27 megapixel crop sensor camera. So it's having the same pixel size. If you are having crop sensor camera which is 27 megapixel, 26 megapixel, and you have full frame camera Sony A7R4 which is 61 megapixel camera, they both having the same pixel size. So it means that the full frame camera Sony A7R4 is performing exactly like the crop sensor camera. I'm giving you another example of Fujifilm X-T4 or X-T3. They are having 26 megapixel camera. So the size of the pixel inside the Fujifilm crop sensor camera, Sony X-T3 and X-T4 is the pixel size is 3.7879 micron meter, or 78 micron meter, which is exactly the same of Sony A7R4. So it means that the crop sensor camera and the full frame camera both are having the identical pixel size. So what was the point of having a full frame camera now at the first place when the full frame camera pixel is exactly identical of the crop sensor camera? So where is the advantage? Where is the advantage of full frame camera? Zero. So it means that the higher the pixels in the full frame camera, their performance is getting equal to the crop sensor camera. So this ideology that full frame camera is better for low light is not anymore, because now most of the companies are releasing high megapixel cameras, which means that their pixel size is getting equal to the pixel size of the crop sensor camera. So it means that identically or ideally they are performing exactly like crop sensor cameras, all those high megapixel full frame cameras. Why? Because of the same pixel size. Pixel size on both cameras, crop sensor and full frame, is now becoming equal. So when they are becoming equal, it means that their performance in the low light is equal. So you guys always say that, oh, crop sensor camera is not good for low light. Why? Because it's crop sensor. No, it has nothing to do with the sensor size. Nothing to do. It all has to do with the pixel size. This is where most people, like 99% people, they don't know that, and people don't know about this fact, and all the retailers or shopkeepers who are buying and selling camera gears, they took the advantage of this information because you don't know that. So they took that advantage and they are selling you the high megapixel cameras because they are in demand. But not people know that the low light performance of all high megapixel cameras are worse. It has nothing to do with full frame size. The full frame sensor is 36 by 24, 36 by 24 millimeter. Crop sensor is 24 by 16 millimeter. It has nothing to do with the sensor size. The low light performance, it all has to do with 3 points: sensor type, pixel size, which I both explained. Number third is SNR, which I'm going to explain in a minute. So, number one point which I explained, which is sensor type, so BSI sensor. So now this is what happened. When the camera companies, they start knowing that if we are going to increase the number of pixels, the size of the pixel is going to be small. So it means that they are not able to capture more light. So what they start doing, they start manufacturing BSI sensor. So at least they are getting a little more light. So that's why D850 BSI sensor, Sony A7R3 BSI sensor, Sony A7R4 BSI sensor. They all are BSI sensor. So at least they try to give a kind of a native advantage at the sensor level to get more light because of the BSI sensor. So it means that they are having more room on top of each pixel, which I explained a few minutes ago, how BSI sensor works. So that's the advantage of BSI sensor for all the high megapixel cameras. See, and the last point, which is SNR firmware. SNR firmware is basically it's a advanced software inside the camera processor whose job is to reconstruct the signal coming out from the sensor under the low light, and after the reconstruction it try to reconstruct the image, especially those shadow details, in a way so you can recover in post processing. Now what the hell that's supposed to mean? Let me explain. You are having higher resolution camera, Sony A7R4, 61 megapixel. Alright, you expose under the low light. Of course, the pixel size is small, so it means that you have to increase the ISO. What happens, because the pixel size is small, it's not able to capture enough details in the shadow area. So whatever the information was there, it's registered inside, registered by the sensor. Output goes into the analog digital converter, and the output from the analog digital converter goes to the camera processor. Now what camera does is very simple. What camera does is it reads the signal and try to map or try to predict all those missing information which is not captured by the sensor, because the sensor size not captured by the pixel, because pixel size is small. So it reads all the pixels, and where the processor not able to find any value because it was not captured at the first place, it predicts or fill in those information artificially. So that was SNR firmware does. It basically try to fill artificially inside the camera all those information which is not captured at the first place by you. See? So this SNR firmware is so advanced that under the low light condition, it basically read a certain value. Even let's suppose if the value is, it's supposed to capture out of 1 to 10, the pixel supposed to capture value 10, but because of the small pixel size, it only capture value 2. Small voltage, small light. So small light means small voltage. Small voltage means value 2. I'm just saying randomly. So rest of the 8 was filled by das SNR firmware. It basically artificially filled those information because it tried to reconstruct the image for you. That's what SNR firmware does. And all the high resolution camera, they come up with so much advanced SNR firmware that you can't even imagine. D850, Sony A7R3, Sony A7R4, and Panasonic SR1, sorry, Panasonic S1R. These 4 cameras, I'm not going to talk about, and Canon, yeah, Canon 5DS, 5DSR, all these five, five cameras, they have such advanced SNR firmware that you, in the Lightroom, when you go to the slider of shadows to 100, you can see all the details coming live, all the details in the shadow coming highlighted. Why? Because of the SNR firmware. It's so advanced. So, and camera companies are not putting these advanced SNR firmware in the low megapixel camera because it goes against the business case. Imagine you are having 12 megapixel camera which 8.4 micron pixel, and it captures all the light, and still you are having such advanced SNR firmware. Even if you missed any shadow information, it recovers. So it means that you are capturing directly HDR image right from the sensor. You don't have to bracket the shot. Usually for HDR image, you are taking one stop overexpose, one neutral expose, and one underexpose, and you then do blend them together in Photoshop to get HDR image. No, 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 no. If you are going to have these kind of advanced sensor, so it means that you are capturing highlights and shadows and everything right inside the sensor, and you are going to have HDR function right from the camera. Well, soon in future we are going to have a sensor which going to give you HDR right from the camera. Soon, not maybe in next 5 years to 8 years, you will see such sensors coming into the commercial consumer based cameras where you can capture HDR images. But if you are exposing for highlights and shadows, so under a long exposure, so the moment it highlights saturated, it stops capturing the highlight, it starts capturing only the shadows. So it gives you both. So your highlights is not going to be clipped, and you will have all the shadow details at the same time. This is what's going to happen. Anyway, so I'm just trying to make this point clear to you guys that whoever says this to you that full frame camera is good for low light, that's totally wrong. It's only valid if the camera is lower megapixel, like 12 megapixel. It only valids to that. Sony 7A, A7S3, Nikon D700, Nikon D3, D3S, especially D3S. These cameras are still the king of low light because they are all 12 megapixel cameras. 12 megapixel means bigger pixel size. Bigger pixel size means good for low light. But they are not good if the number of pixels are more. Nikon D850, Z7, Z7 II, Sony A7R3, Sony A7R4, Canon 5DS, Canon 5DSR, Sony Panasonic SR1. All these cameras are high resolution and their low light performance is not good, especially Canon 5DS. Start giving so much noise even after 400 ISO. What's the point? I remember when we have D800, the best ISO that we hit was 400 with 36 megapixels. Then we have D810. It pushed the boundary to 800 ISO because of the better SNR. The sensor is still the same, pixel size still the same, but because Nikon put advanced SNR firmware inside the D810, so it performs better in compared to D800 or D800E. So in D810 we hit the best ISO was 800. So D800 was 400 ISO, D810 800 ISO, and D850 hit 1600 ISO because of both. Uh, Although its number of pixels was increased, uh, but because of the better SNR and BSI sensor, the D850 ISO you can easily hit to 1600 best. Uh, then we have your Sony. Its ISO performance A7R A7R3 especially, it's really great. Even with the higher pixel number, the pixel pitch is small but still good for low light because of the better SNR. Sony A7R3 is really good in compared to its competitors. But the worst is Canon 5DS and 5DSR. I used that camera and I saw after 400 ISO it's worse. It's really worse. I don't know about Sony A7R4, but I'm sure the story will be the same. You cannot escape physics. You just can't. Physics is there. The pixel size, you cannot overcome the physical limitation of the pixel size. You just can't. The software can compensate the lack of gain at the pixel level to some degree, but not always. The small pixel size means it's small. You cannot capture all those missing details by putting an advanced software which can predict. Still, it can't. There is a level that SNR firmware can help you to reconstruct the signal, but not always. Not always. That's why you have to put all these high resolution cameras on tripod and slow your shutter speed to get more light. That's the disadvantage. It always have. Noise is there. It's always going to be. So in this video, I just explained you that full frame camera has nothing to do with low light. All it's the pixel size. I hope you like this video, and I'll see you guys in future with some new stuff, with some new topic. Till then, take care. Bye.